Hi, my name's Howard Haynes, and welcome to the first ever episode of Howard's UFO Chronicles. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be a short enough podcast because I really just want to introduce myself and the podcast, what it's going to be all about. So here we go. As I said, my name's Howard Haynes. I'm a UFO experiencer, to use the UFO world vernacular. So yeah, I've had UFO visits since early 2020 for the last 4 years. They've been very regular visits, and I suppose when I first started having my visits, my encounters, it was still a fairly no-go subject, the whole UFO subject and topic. Now, at least, it's being spoken about more. It's in the news more. You're hearing about the American Congress, and it's out there more. So I suppose it's easier to talk about. My goal doing this podcast is, to try and help people, understand the phenomenon, and to try and alleviate their fears. To try and help them understand it and know that the UFO presence here on Earth it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a very positive thing, and they're very peaceful and very loving people. I suppose most importantly, I'm going to try and have a bit of fun with it. Hence the background behind me. It's what's life if you can't have a little bit of fun. I'm Irish, obviously. If you haven't guessed, I'm from Galway in the west of Ireland, and we pride ourselves on having, as they say, the crack. So, yeah, I'll be hoping to have a bit of crack with you. Yeah, so I've no idea how many podcasts I'm going to do. I'm thinking in my head, maybe 8 or 10, and go from there. If it builds a bit of popularity, great. The main goal, as I say, is to help people, to alleviate their fears, because there's going to be an awful lot of stuff coming out in the next 2 years about this, and I know I was quite shocked when I first came across the subject, because I'd no interest in UFOs or ETs or anything like that. So it was quite shocking when it first started happening. So yeah, I'll be explaining my journey. I've a lot of photos, a lot of videos I want to show you about my experiences. There's a lot of guys out there doing UFO podcasts. Like say Jack from Cosmic Road or that Christian Harloff, and those guys are doing a great job. But they're really reporting the news. That's not really what I want to do. I want to talk about my own experiences, my journey. How it made me feel. The people I've met along the way, the people I've lost along the way. How it's changed my life. I'll be doing an episode on our reality and the power of the conscious mind. That's one I want to do. I want to talk about how the whole UFO phenomenon and my ET experiences how it's changed my life. I'll definitely be doing an episode on that one. I'm going to try and have some of my friends on who've experienced this with me, and get their views and how they started off, down this road, because I'm relatively new. Most of the people I've met along the way have been into the UFO phenomenon for years. So yeah, I'll be hoping to have a few of those on. I'll be hoping to have some fresh new guests on. I'd be interested to hear, the public, your take on experiences you've had, your take on this podcast, on how, if you like it, if you don't, I hope you do. But more so, I hope it helps people, because I did go through a time where, you know, I was scared out of my wits with this until I got over myself, and until I, you know, realized just, you know, they're very friendly. They're very, you know, their spirituality is way beyond ours, you know, and I've had a taste of it, and it's amazing, you know, and they're out there waiting for us. Well, they're not even out there; they're here, waiting for us just to calm down a little bit, and, you know, to unite a little bit more, and to invite them down. You know, they're here. You know, they're all around us all the time, and they could easily, you know, show themselves and more, and you know, somebody said, why, you know, the famous expression, why don't they land on the White House lawn? You know, I don't think they're ever going to do that, because they're never going to. First of all, they're not going to rub that ego. Second of all, you know, as I said to a friend of mine recently, say they got 10 craft or 100 craft, and say they flew around the globe, and they flew over Ireland and over Spain, and, you know, over France, and, you know, Germany and all that, and they did a lap of the globe, and then they did a lap this way, and then they did a lap that way, and every country in the world saw them over, you know, a couple hour period or whatever, right? 50 million people would drop dead of a heart attack. You know, that's why they haven't done it. They know this, you know, they're super peaceful, you know, and they're so far ahead of us. They're so much more advanced, you know, and I know you've heard this before, you know, they're so far ahead of us. If they wanted to do us harm, they could, you know, and they haven't. And, you know, certain people in certain governments have been stupid enough to tackle them and shoot them down, you know, and, you know, it's we've started off on the bad leg, on a you know, but, you know, the people out there like myself who are having these experiences, at least, you know, thankfully, the ETs are getting, I mean, obviously they know this anyway, but they're getting a positive experience from those people, you know, and at least we're not all bloody headers, you know, so that's a good thing. Yeah, so that this is the podcast. This is what it's going to be about. I'll be showing you, you know, photos and videos every week of my own experiences, talking about my own experiences, and you know, we'll go from there, and hopefully you'll come back and you'll join me, you know, for the next episode number 2. This is episode number 1, the intro. Yeah, so I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care, mind yourselves, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.